So for the 66th class, we learned about Russia and the Bolshevik Revolution. Now, this is a 2-day class, so this video is going to be probably fitting a quart in a pint-sized container. So there is an assignment, pretty doable assignment. Check that out first. And this is the material we hopefully learned about in class regarding this subject, the Russian Revolution and the rise of communism. So we started off reminding ourselves what we already know, the differences between communism and capitalism, economically, philosophically, and so forth. We took it a little deeper and once again compared socialism to communism, the differences, okay? And hopefully this is old hat by now. These two guys, there's old Karl Marx and there is Lenin, leader of the Bolshevik Revolution. We talked about these two gentlemen and how they influenced the world, in particular how they influenced the communist world and Russia. Okay, now this Communist Manifesto is a game-changing book. It became the Bible for any nation that adopted communism, mainly Russia and China during this time in the Cold War and all that good stuff, right? So the question I posed, why would anyone choose to live under communism instead of capitalism? And the analogy, if you recall, in class with the pencils. Now, if I were to take all of your pencils and pens, some of you walk into class with bags full of them and they're, colorful, and you give me 50. Some kids enter class with no pencil at all. So if I redistribute the pencils and give everybody 2, if you had 0, 2's pretty good. What sucks is you lost 48 of them because me as the government taking them for you. So in short, if you have nothing, a little is better than nothing, where in capitalism you can start with nothing and end with a lot. So that's why people would choose communism over capitalism. You're not going to choose it if you are in good circumstances. You got that. So we reviewed Russia. Russia, the biggest country in the world, the harsh winters, how the population is dispersed, about how it was ruled by czars, and the Russification of the language and Orthodox Christianity, which allowed Russia to spread to the biggest country. We talked about pogroms and how it was pretty unfortunate to be Jewish in Russia and how Russia was late to the table in industrialization. We revisited feudalism and the Russian serf and that kind of thing. So after World War I, the Russians pulled out. Okay, if you recall, America had to fill in for them, and they had a really unpleasant experience. So you had a very discontent populace between these people at the bottom who really had nothing. They had no hope. The World War I was a disaster. This was a situation which was ripe for communism. Again, people don't adopt communism when things are sunny and happy. And then we talked about how Russia became communism with their March or February revolution, depending on how it is, and how workers were demanding bread. They wanted food. They wanted some basic dignity, which they were not getting. So they were fed up between World War I and not having the basic things to live. So they revolted. And this term Soviets. Now, Soviets became a term to encompass people who supported the movement. And they won. They took over, okay? And again, we looked at communism one more time, how history has been a struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and how the haves versus the have-nots, and how the government should control the means of production and reallocating resources, all that kind of thing. And then we went into more detail about Vladimir Lenin, the man who was the leader of the revolution. And we talked about his story and how he was very essential in the revolution being a success for them. And again, their goals are pretty simple. And again, if I'm an illiterate, uneducated serf, or I'm somebody who has not had means to education, I can get these 3 things. Even if I do have education. Peace. Yeah, I'm sick of war. Easy. Land. I'm done with being a serf. Give me some land of my own that I can do my thing with. And then bread. I'm hungry. Feed me. So peace, land, bread. It worked. Simple. A lot of times in marketing, simple works, okay? And then we have another revolution, okay, also known as the Bolshevik Revolution, where the Bolsheviks take over the former monarchy of Russia, the aristocracy. It ended the czars and ended this. And you had the Red Russians versus the White Russians. The Reds were the communists. The Whites were those who sided with the old monarchy. and the Reds win. Okay, so we see the hammer and the sickle. The sickle gets grain and the hammer is for industry. That was their iconography. Again, effective, simple, it worked. Now, the word I pronounced probably more than anything in my history instruction, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Litovsk. Yeah, I always choke on that term. And this was after the war. And what happened was this treaty to end World War I and then kind of switch gears into becoming their own communist nation, okay? And again, to reiterate, civil war, they did fight amongst themselves, and the royal family, the Romanovs, were all brought to the basement and killed in that myth of Anastasia, how one escaped. That's not true. Sorry to ruin your childhood. And it was a mess. But when it was all said and done, the Red Russians won over the White Russians. And bye-bye monarchy, hello communism. Okay? And then afterwards, the communist forces had to keep their people in check. And they did it with the most brutal ways, with a secret police that would, come into your house at 3 in the morning, and they took over the means of production. So wealthy people either got, brought down a lot of pegs or had to get out of town, get out of Russia, because the wealthy, they had their stuff confiscated for the sake of the movement. So again, if you were in a really bad position, you were pretty happy about this. If you were middle class, if you were upper class, you weren't so happy because you just got brought down a lot of pegs. Okay? And again, more war, more war. Okay, this was not an easy revolution. So the movement started in 1917, but it took 4 or 5 years before things to settle in through a lot of violence, So at this point, it's over, and they start becoming their own nation, and it became called the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, and it went on to become a big and powerful nation, and the main player in the Cold War and a superpower. And then you have Lenin's War of Communism. It really did not work out well because, again, communism doesn't end well. When you lose that human incentive to do things, and so he implemented a new economic policy in an attempt to improve matters and that sort of thing. We talked about that in class. Now, it did successfully revive the Russian economy, but it was a temporary retreat from communism. So it's interesting, as they get away from communism, they have some success, and then they move back to more purely communist sort of thinking, and things end badly. Maybe they should have figured that out, but they didn't. So Stalin eventually comes to power. So when Lenin dies, we have this power struggle between Stalin and Trotsky. Now, Stalin was tough, and he was mean, and he was not a guy you'd want to mess with. Trotsky was more erudite, educated, more of a thinker, and that should say Stalin, not Lenin. Sorry. So that's not Lenin, that's Stalin. A little typo there, which I'm going to fix in a second. Okay. And when he became in power, he was in power for a very long time, and he ruled with an iron fist. He did not mess around. By the way, Stalin was not his birth name. Stalin means man of steel. It's like, I'm no longer Mr. Salsiccioli, I'm Mr. Superman. That reveals his ego. Anyway, so Stalin implements a 5-year plan, and this was his attempt to, improve things in his country, and it created a command economy where government officials make all the economic decisions and they own all the means of production. You can guess what happened. The people who were on the good end of that were getting wealthy, and the people at the bottom, not so much, okay? And then we talked about the difference between a command economy and a capitalist economy. You'll see this again in economics next year if you are a sophomore, okay? And the question is, was it a success? Now, it had a lot of heavy goals, but you talked about it. In the end, it probably wasn't great for the worker, which was the whole intent of communism. So, but at this point, Stalin kind of had Russia, in that iron fist of his. Now, collectivization is a concept that permeated Russia post-Bolshevik Revolution until the end of the Cold War in the 90s, where all of the economic, the money, the food, the resources were all taken and reallocated. What this resulted in is people waiting in really long lines to get a loaf of bread or to get a pair of pants because everybody got the same. Well, not the people in government, they were doing just fine, but the regular person had to wait in these lines. So collectivization was not a great deal for the people. Now, some people did resist, but it didn't end well for them. And Stalin's rule resulted in millions of people dying in famines. Just a total horror show, and we talked about that in class. And he used terror. He used fear. If you went against him, he would send you to Siberia, to these gulags, these horrible labor camps, and secret police torture. It was Stalin, again, pretty evil man, it's safe to say, even by any context of any time. Okay, and he purged all those he felt were going against him. And the purge was, hey, if you aren't with me, I'm going to kill you, even if you were suspected of it. And Stalin was a really paranoid guy. There are some people who were loyal to him, but he didn't think they were loyal to him, and didn't end well for them. Okay, so the impact of the purge made Stalin an absolute dictator, but it killed the best and brightest, some really top people in their society. So it was not a healthy thing when you look at it. And a little primary source: Stalin ruthlessly used terror as a weapon against his own people. He perpetrated crimes against humanity, carried out politically motivated mass murders, and systematically violated his people's individual rights. Police spies did not hesitate to open private letters or plant listening devices. A vast network of internal spies reported on groups or individuals. Nothing appeared in print without official government approval. There was no free press. There was no safe method of protest. This is a very, very dark chapter in Russian history. And we talked about people who went against them: artists, writers, those who spoke against them, free thinkers, atheists, Jews. It was Stalin got rid of these people. Okay, very controlling. And he used propaganda. And propaganda, you can see Stalin looking good, holding babies, a little, Russian flag, and you can see him using propaganda. And again, people did not have means to alternative ideas. Okay, the government controlled the radio, controlled the newspaper. So a whole couple generations were brought up really without the capability of critical thought because they only got one side. Propaganda is very dangerous. Notice that a lot of the bad guys in history try to get control of the media. Right. Okay, you get this. And we talked about the positives and the negatives of socialism. Should have been doable. We compared different revolutions of the American Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution. Okay, we talked about these. Then we ended with a few questions that you can do on your own. So I know I threw a lot at you and I probably didn't go into the detail that we needed. However, this is over 2 days, and hopefully if you were absent, you weren't absent for both days. But my suggestion to you as we go full circle here is use this PowerPoint or this video to fill out this assignment, which is a way of taking this information and applying it to a couple different things. But it isn't very difficult, to be honest with you. So anyway, hope you learned something, and thank you for watching.